At newstalk.ie. Now, even with the extension of the winter fuel allowance, many are finding it tough going, and at a time of the year when things should be warming up. Some have to choose between food and fuel. Brian O'Neill reports.
With this cold snap that's going on in a few weeks, I'm being crippled with heating costs, even with the fuel allowance. So the price of everything going up, ESB is going up, gas is going up. I can't afford really. I'm deciding if I can afford to put heating on for the kids in the morning, for an hour in the evening, an hour in the morning, that's it.
John Mark McCafferty, Head of Social Justice with the Society of St Vincent de Paul. Since 2009, we've seen effectively a trebling of the amount of money, amount of resources we're putting in towards the energy affordability side of things. So we've really ramped up the amount of assistance, and that's not sustainable, because if it keeps increasing at that pace, we're not going to be able to meet anywhere near the need regarding the increasing costs of gas, electricity and solid fuels.
I'm Mary from the daycare centre, Lurge Daycare Centre. We give so much every week out of our pension off it, you know what I mean? And then when we get our bill, it's still over £100 to pay, because the bills are about £300 for if you didn't pay anything every week with the cold weather. It's always over £300 on your, that's your central heating bill. And then you get your ESB, that could be 50 or 60. So all the bills, one comes after the other. And when you get them, your whole pension is gone on bills. They keep coming in all the time. Yeah, when you come to a certain age, we're old, we're not young, in our 80s, so you need to have the cold. You have the heat, I should say. It must be very bad.
The challenge is to ensure that in a cold period like now, the older people are not scared to heat their homes, but to heat their homes adequately to about 21 degrees for every single room that they're in.
You can't go anywhere. You can't do the things you'd like to do. Couldn't go out and say, no, I buy this and I buy that. You wouldn't have it to do that. No, you often see a thing you'd like, and you can just forget about it. It's miserable.
People who would have been doing very well some time ago, 5-10 years ago, might have been net contributors to the Society of St Vincent de Paul, are really finding themselves struggling with the cost of energy. They're on lower or fixed incomes, and they're finding it hard to balance the rising costs with energy with the diminishing financial resources that they have.
Well, we've had their heating all the time now. Sometimes you try to put it off for an hour or so just to try and put it down, but then you have to put it back on again. Very hard to stick the cold, you know what I mean?
Many of the people that we're assisting are going into arrears because they're trying to keep their house warm for the children. So most of the people that we assist are families, and they're trying to keep the house warm to ensure the kind of health and well-being of their children, and at the same time they're trying to feed themselves and their children. They're trying to clothe them, and for many that is an everyday struggle which they're really struggling to balance. That leads to huge pressure and stress at an individual level in terms of being able to cope, being able to provide for one's family, and our volunteers are seeing that on a daily and a weekly basis. This choice between heating and eating, this choice between the various household bills and essentials. We're not talking about Sky Sports here, we're talking, the heating of the home. So the things that we take for granted, that luckily many of us still are able to just about afford, but for many of those we assist who are struggling. And energy is one of those key trigger points.
My last ESB bill was €250, 2-bedroom apartment. It's pretty expensive.
What are you going to do?
As I've been doing all along, literally cutbacks. And when I was a 7-year-old, 8-year-old daughter, you can't not give them Easter eggs or bring them out on Paddy's Day and all that. You can't afford it.
With older people, they don't tend to go into debt because of energy usage. They tend to be so scared of putting on the heat that they'll go without. Those older people really face the risk of living in cold rooms, cold spaces, cold homes, and they're very much at higher risk of both physical health, but mental ill health, and ultimately, excess winter death levels.
I suffer with my breathing. My name is Owen, and I'm at the Lourdes Care Centre. It's so cold twice. Without heating all day. I have electric blowout heat, and that's no good to me. It blows out, but it affects my chest because I suffer with my breathing. But the central heating, it comes on when I put it on, and it knocks off in an hour. It's set for only 1 hour.
Our message here is loud and clear. We're asking people to come to us if they have any problems with the heat in their homes. And the message for older people is to make sure that they heat their homes to adequate levels. We're asking older people not to be scared about putting on the heat, and not to be scared about putting on the radiator and the central heating, because it's essential that they remain warm, that their circulation is good, and ensure both good mental health and good physical health. So that's absolutely key.
Should we be freezing down there? Well, it's freezing.
So if you get a cold, if you get the flu, with the respiratory disease, what does that do to you now?
I have to go to me. If I get I have to go to my GP, and he gives me antibiotics. €14 every month for all my medication.
But the big thing here is for gas and electricity, the people enter into realistic and sustainable repayment plans or instalment plans. But a lot of those are people are defaulting on because they're unrealistic. They're set too high because people are trying to pay the repayment plan back, and they're also trying to pay the existing bi-monthly bill. And I don't think the penny has dropped there with the utilities. They're happy enough to get money back through the pay-as-you-go meters. They get 25% of each. So they get €2.50 of each €10 that you pay on a pay-as-you-go meter. And people may be paying off their arrears through the pay-as-you-go meter for months and maybe even years. The utilities don't seem to be as flexible when it comes to these repayment plans, and they have to understand that people are both paying the repayment plan itself and the bi-monthly bill. And when you add the two together, that can add huge financial stress and strain to an individual or a family, and they need to reflect that in their practice.
You were saying to me there that in order to pay the bills, you don't have a social life, or you can't go out.
Well, you wouldn't have a social life and a pension like that, would you, and pay bills like that? How would you have one? Unless you get into difficulties for it, and that's something we don't want to do.
Would you know people who maybe have got into difficulties?
There's plenty of people, I suppose, and young people as well, are all in difficulties, aren't they? It's not in existence, that's all it is.
We have increases in the cost of energy if you look at gas, electricity, oil. So what that adds up to is increasing lack of energy affordability. And this is in a context when the government themselves 15 months ago launched an energy affordability strategy. That strategy, modest in its ambitions, is silent right now.
John Burton says they're extending the fuel allowance because of the cold weather for another week.
Yeah,
is that enough?
Well, I had only extending it for this week. It might be taking it over next week.
When that fuel allowance goes, are you going to be able to keep the heating on?
Well, I'll cut down on my food. I won't be able to buy food. It's only for here. Me dinner here for 5 days a week, I'll be lost. We're going back to worse days than we ever were. Everybody's struggling. They're just afraid to open their mouth. They're either down without food, or they're cutting down on something to make up for it.
There you go. Brian O'Neill reporting there. Here's Tara with the news.
Thanks, Sean.